You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 117. In this episode of the podcast, we'll be meeting Noelle Holten, who is an award-winning blogger at crimebookjunkie.co.uk. She's also a PR and social media manager for Bookouture, a leading digital publisher in the UK, and she has her own series of crime fiction books featuring DC Maggie Jameson. The latest book in that series, Dead Perfect, is going to be published on October 16th and is available for pre-order now on Amazon. Noelle's background is fascinating. She worked as a senior probation officer for 18 years. She works in public relations and social media in publishing, so she has a lot of experience not only for writing crime fiction, but also in the world of PR and social media. So I had a lot of fun talking to her about her books, about social media, and a whole bunch more. So stay tuned for an interview with Noelle Holten coming up here in a moment. But first, a quick reminder to please rate and review this podcast wherever it is that you're listening to it, or wherever it is you consume your podcast. Your review and your rating really helps me get the word out for the podcast. And please do visit my site at thrillerauthors.com for show notes and access to my over 100 interviews with other authors. All right, here's my interview with Noelle Holten. Hi, everybody. This is Alan with Meet the Thriller Author, and I'm thrilled to be talking with Noelle Holten, an award-winning blogger at crimebookjunkie.co.uk. Noelle is also the PR and social media manager for Bookouture, a leading digital publisher in the UK. Dead Inside was her debut novel, which was an international Kindle bestseller, and it was the start of the DC Maggie Jameson series. And her latest book in that series is Dead Perfect, which will be published on October 16th. So, Noelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you have such a cool, fascinating background. You worked as a probation officer for 18 years, so you're actually immersed in the world of crime, the real world, before becoming a crime fiction series writer. Were you always interested in crime? How did all that come to be for you, and how do you end up start writing your own novels?
Yeah, I've always had a fascination with crime and offending. I was reading like Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys when I was really young, and then I progressed on to reading true crime books and horror, and then eventually crime fiction. And while I was after high school, when I went into university, all the degrees I've done have some sort of crime or social deviance relation to it. So I did philosophy, where my degree was focused on morality and the law. I did sociology, where it was criminal and social deviancy. I did sociology, which is criminal and social deviancy. I did a degree in community justice, which focused on offending. My diploma in probation studies, and then I went on to do my master's in criminology. So I've always had this crime fascination, and obviously after I finished my master's, I applied to the probation service over here because I did my master's in England. All my other studies were done in Toronto or Canada, and from probation, I did that for 18 years. And I worked my last 6 or 7 years, I was working as a senior probation officer. I had 2 offices. One was based in a police station, so we worked with prolific offenders and domestic abuse perpetrators and high crime causing substance misusers. So, and then the other team I managed dealt with low to medium risk offenders. So yeah, everything's been crime related. And having blogged and reviewed crime fiction, someone once suggested, well, have you ever thought of writing a book yourself? And I used to be interested. I used to do a bit of creative writing in high school, but never thought, I was good enough to actually write or finish a whole novel. Like I struggled writing my dissertation, and that was only 25,000 words. So I couldn't imagine writing, a full 90,000 word novel. But I attended a writing course, Crime and Publishment, which was run by a friend of mine, Graham Smith, and Michael J. Malone, both writers themselves over here in the UK. And I had written a prologue for Dead Inside. And I'd not shown anybody that prologue, but I showed it to them after just coming up to the end of the weekend. And both of them were like, wow, that's really powerful. You know, you should write this book. So I left there with a bit of enthusiasm and thinking, you know, yeah, I can do this. And sat and wrote every day. And by mid May, the first draft of Dead Inside was written. And the next year, I attend a lot of crime festivals over here. So the next year, I attended Harrogate, the big festival over here, Crime Fiction Festival. And I was avoiding like editors and, you know, agents and everything like the plague because I just thought, no one's going to read my book. But I was kind of, after a few vodkas, convinced to pitch to an editor. And that was on a Saturday. So on the Monday, when I returned from the weekend, he emailed me and said, I'd love to read the whole manuscript. I sent it to him. And I had submitted to a few other places as well. And the next week, 3 of them came back to me with offers. So that was it. I was like, oh my God, this is
I should have tried this earlier.
Yeah. And I know that's it doesn't always happen. I know people submit for years and years and years before a book's picked up. And I don't know if it was the multi-agency angle of my book, which is different from a lot of the crime fiction. Although the police are the, you know, main investigators, Dead Inside is very much probation and police focused. Dead Wrong has social services and probation and the police involved. And Dead Perfect also has the offending profiling aspect. So they all have that kind of multi-agency teamwork, because when it comes to solving crime, from my own experience anyways, a lot of agencies are called upon for their information when it comes to certain criminals or crimes. So I wanted to kind of inject that because that's what I knew. And yeah, there you go. That was it.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point because publishers and readers, everybody wants, you know, to follow the, you know, read a good crime fiction book. But if there's something that makes it a little different, it really makes it kind of stand up, go to the top of the pile, like they say. So I think that was a cool angle. Plus your background too. So, you know, most of us have to like, you know, Google and research everything. I mean, I'm sure you do a lot of research as well, but you had a lot to draw back. So that probably gave you a legs up.
Yeah, it absolutely did. I love research. I've always been a kind of geek that way. You know, I read a lot about even the stuff even though I've been out of probation now for 3 years, I still read a lot of their policies and protocols because I'm a bit of a geek that way. I like to know these things. And I guess because probation was a big part of my life. So yeah, it was, I still do research because obviously I don't know how to chop up a body or, you know, so certain aspects I do have to research, but I enjoy doing that and it doesn't feel like work to me. In fact, I can become so heavily distracted by research that I have to remind myself, you're writing a book now. Time to get back to the words.
Yeah, have you ever considered or thought about the true crime? I'm always been fascinated with that too, but it seems like so daunting to write a true crime book.
I would absolutely love to do it, but I think there's so many legalities.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be really careful, and you have to be right on the mark in terms of it. So I wouldn't dare. I mean, I still read loads of true crime. I'm totally fascinated, and all the television programs like Netflix at night. I don't sleep a lot, so I'm either reading or watching true crime programs on Netflix, and it's fascinating. But as much as I would love to do it, I just don't think I would just be too afraid to get something wrong, or you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think publishers are also quite savvy when it comes to true crime. You really have to get the facts right because you know, if you make a mistake, there's a lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's why you usually see those books written like by experienced journalists who know how to do their research and all that stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So you say you're a fan. So were you reviewing books before you started to write, or was that something you're doing on the side on your website and your blog?
Yeah, I started my blog in 2015. I'd been while I was a probation officer, and kind of um, the background and not inspiration, but I had a lot of experience. I was in an abusive relationship, so I did a lot of reading during that time, and I didn't really, I kind of isolated myself. But once I came out of that relationship, which was in 2015, I started joining a lot of book groups on Facebook, and came across people talking about these blogs, and I was like, what the heck is a blog? So I became friendly with one of the bloggers, Best Crime Books and More, who was really well known as a blogger, and she offered me a guest spot, to write reviews on her blog. So I thought, great. And after a few months, she's like, you really should just start up your own blog. You're clearly enjoying this. And she kind of booted me out. So I start not in a malicious way, of course, in a helpful, supportive way. And so I started Crime Book Junkie, which was fantastic. And I only review books I love on the blog, because I've learned after a while, I don't, if I'm not enjoying a book, I just don't tend to finish it now. Mm-hmm. And I can't review an unfinished read. So my blog is all about all the books, the crime fiction books I love. And then all of a sudden publishers started sending me stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting like, you should see the amount of books I have in my house that I still haven't read. It's incredible. I will never be lost. I could never say, what should I read next? Because I've got so much to choose from. It's fantastic. But yeah, I started doing that. And then Bookouture, I came across them, and I started reading Angie Marzin's, and I loved their books. So one year again at Harrogate Crime Festival, Harrogate seems to be my lucky star. I get a lot of great things out of Harrogate. I attended there, and Kim Nash, who is the head of publicity for Bookouture, was saying, because I was a blogger and they knew that I reviewed a lot of their books, would I be interested in doing some freelance for them? So I started organizing blog tours and working with their authors in the evenings after I came home from probation. And that was in 2016, I believe. And by this time, probation over here, the government had privatized half of it, and I was in the private sector, which I absolutely hated. So I was looking for something to get out of probation by then. And after, I think it was about 8 months, Kim asked me, if a vape here, would you be interested in working for us full time? And I was like, oh my God, yes. Mm-hmm. So a vacancy came up. I was interviewed and I got the job then. So I left probation in July of 2017. And I remember when I handed in my, the last month that I handed in my resignation for probation, my officers kept coming up to me saying, oh my God, all the years that we've known you, we've never seen you smile so much because I was just so happy to be leaving. And that was it. I started working full time then for Bookouture. Yeah. And I still review.
Oh, you still do? Okay, yeah, because I checked your website. It seems like you're still putting up reviews and stuff and all over the place.
Yeah, a lot slower. I used to read a book every 1 to 2 days. I could read a book even while working and all that kind of stuff. But now with writing, I have to be really careful because I try and avoid, especially when I'm in the early writing stages or editing, I try reading police procedurals, which are my favorite to read, because I don't want to lose my voice and I don't want to start, I think the risk when you're writing is if you're reading something of the similar genre, it's very easy to kind of forget that, this is your story, but you're influenced by someone else's story if you're reading it. So while I'm writing, I try and stick to maybe psychological thrillers or true crime, things that kind of take me away from police procedural. But yeah, I still review, and I love reviewing. I'll never stop reviewing, but I've got about 8 to write up. I still haven't written up because writing does take a lot of time.
Yeah, that is crazy too. With having this podcast, I started getting the same thing. Publishers, can we add you.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, okay. I didn't realize the floodgates that opened of
Yeah, yeah. I might be hitting
books.
you up after this as well. So I've got two authors
Yeah,
who would
which
love to be in a podcast.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. But which is it's awesome. But then yeah, like you said too, then I have so many books, and then my Kindle is to read pile. So yeah, it gets kind of
Yeah.
like whoa. It's a good
Don't
problem to
even get me
have.
started on my Kindle. Oh my
Yeah,
God, I can't even tell you how many I have on there.
it's a good problem to have though. A lot of
Yes,
great thriller books, crime fiction books to read.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so does Bookshare, do they specialize in a certain genre, or they publish all type of books?
We publish all type of books, crime thrillers, action thrillers, women's fiction, rom-coms. We have some, uh, not so much YA, but we have some fantasy books, some, gosh, a huge amount of, and a varied mix of genres. So, yeah, it's great because not only when I because I work as publicity for all the books that I work with, all the authors and titles that I work with, I read those. So I'm not only reading just crime fiction, I get to read a lot of women's fiction, which I probably never would have come across except for working at Bookouture. And it's great. It's a nice little cleansing palette to get some of the crime and nastiness out of your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I ran across you on Twitter, and I was so intrigued with your background because you write the books, and you're doing PR and the social media management.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is for a thriller author to be versed in all that stuff? And I know self-published and indie authors seem to be really into that, but traditional authors, do they still have to be doing that, or do the publishers take care of that for them?
I think it depends on where you're published. Bookouture, and I'm not just saying that because I am publicity, but I think we are quite unique in the publishing industry in terms of um, publicity and marketing. We do a lot for our authors, and of course, the authors will have to pick up, after their publication day, because we have like a publication day every day, pretty much every day. So, we're doing the build up, and then the author kind of has to pick up after, the publication to keep that momentum going. But the great thing about Bookouture also is the fact that, for an author, their books you don't have to wait a year for their next book. It will be 3 or 4 months down the road. So in that interim, the author will be promoting their next book, and we'll be promoting the next book, as well as keeping the momentum alive for their latest release. Whereas in a lot of the traditional publishers, they have some publicity, and I suppose because we're a digital publisher, all our focus and the importance in terms of selling books is the ebook side of things. Whereas traditional publishers, like the top five, will have book launches, for paperback launches, and you know that's what their focus is on rather than the ebook. But it was quite interesting with lockdown how that kind of had to change and swap. And I think for digital publishing and the digital publishing industry, lockdown has kind of opened people's eyes, because there's a lot of snobbery around ebooks and publish in the publishing industry. Whereas, we do incredibly well for our authors. And although we have paperbacks from Amazon print on demand, it's the ebooks that we're constantly promoting and pushing. And our authors do amazing. And some do probably a lot better than a traditionally published author. So, they may get the big advances, but they have to pay off those advances. And they don't see a penny of their royalties until those advances are paid off. Whereas with our authors, their money's in the bank. There's no waiting for that. So yeah, it's quite interesting in that respect. So publicity wise, that's what we do a lot. Whereas you don't, I'm with a different publisher. My books are published by One More Chapter, which is a imprint of HarperCollins, and they do some publicity, but in the main, I'm responsible for my own publicity.
Yeah, as I've heard before there that even when traditionally, like a lot of people will say, "Oh, I just want to focus on writing," but really you have to do the marketing and the publicity, some of it yourself as well, if you want to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you want your books to sell, you
Yeah.
definitely do. And that's even if you're with a big publisher. I think people are under the illusion when you're with a traditional publisher, one of the top five, that, it's all done for you and you just have to sit back and wait for the royalties to come in. But you really, if you want to keep your book alive and fresh and in people's faces and getting out to new readers, you have to push your book without being constantly buy my book.
Yeah.
You have to be creative in the ways that you do it as well. It's hard and it takes up a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Stephen, you see, like, even Stephen King, when puts a new book out, he's out doing the interviews and
Yeah.
publishing. I mean, even at his level.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't mind his bank balance.
Yes, yes. I'll
I'd
take what
pay someone to
percent.
do that for me then.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I was kind of wonder about that too, but I guess it's just part of the deal. It's
Yeah.
ingrained in them. But yes, at that level, I'd be like, no. Yeah.
Someone else can do that for
Yeah.
me.
So can you tell us a little bit then about your books, your series, Maggie Jameson series? How did it all come together? And I mean, tell us of the beginning of it. It started as a prologue, right? Or
Yes. DC. Okay. The series, when I pitched the book, it was kind of supposed to be a multi-agency team, that each book was going to be led by a different kind of agency. So Dead Inside, for instance, was very much probation, and it's very much Lucy's story, although we're introduced to Maggie because she's seconded to the domestic abuse and homicide unit, which is a multi-agency team within the police station. And that was loosely based on what the work I did when I worked in a police station. But when I submitted the book, obviously, my editor was kind of like, okay, well, how about we make the police officer, let's get her more in there. Let's make it more a police procedural, because it was kind of cross genre, I guess. And commercially, I guess they felt that it would fit better in, the police procedural box. But people still say Dead Inside is very much Lucy and probation. But book two, Dead Wrong, is very much police led and Maggie's story. So each book you kind of learn a bit more about a different agency. And, Maggie's this kind of, I like to think she's a bit of a feisty, kind of a know-it-all, but not in an arrogant way. Like she knows a lot. Well, kind of, I guess, a bit like me. Like she likes to know her job, and she likes to know, other aspects of other people's jobs. So she's a bit of a geek in that sense. And she has been a detective for 10 or so years. And she goes back to her own team, the Major Organized Crime Department in Staffordshire, in book two. So she's back with her original team. And then I have to introduce all of them in that. So it's very much a series where if you don't like a lot of characters, I love lots of characters, which is why I write about them. But if you like a police procedural that has like 3 people in it, my series will not be for you. But if you like, a bit of a diverse mix of characters and lots of them, then definitely check out my series, because that's exactly what you'll get. And you'll get to learn about how the agencies work to solve crimes. Because like I was saying earlier, it's not just the police team. Like when I worked in probation, and one of the offenders we supervised was involved in a serious further offense. Police would come to us for information on that person, because probation are the one area in the criminal justice field, at least over here, who work with an offender from the moment they're charged, because we write their pre-sentence reports for court, all the way through to the end of their sentence, whether that be prison or the community. So they know everything there is to know about that person, because they're seeing them all the time, and they work with them throughout their sentence. So I wanted to make sure that aspect was kind of included. And same with drug and alcohol agencies. If people have substance misuse problems, or domestic abuse agencies when there's abuse either from a perpetrator or a victim involved. So that's what I try and incorporate in the series. And I love writing it. I'm on book 5 now. I can't believe that.
Oh,
My
wow.
debut came out last year. I've just handed in book 4, so that's with my editor. And I'm about 10,000 words into book 5 now. But after that, that's the last book of my contract. So if I'm not offered a further contract, if the series doesn't take off or progress, I have a few other ideas that I'd like to pursue as well. So.
Yeah, and then the third book is Dead Perfect, and that comes out on the 16th of October. What's the
Yes.
plot of that? What's the plot of that book? Where's she at?
Dead Perfect is quite a creepy read. Well, actually, so is Dead Wrong, and Dead Inside is quite emotional. But Dead Perfect picks up. In Dead Wrong, you're kind of introduced to a subplot, and it involves the offender profiler, Dr. Kate Maloney, getting these creepy messages. So in Dead Perfect, a body's found, and it opens with a body being found, and the body resembles Dr. Kate Maloney. So she's found face down. And I'm not going to tell you what happens, but yeah, there's quite a personal interest in the case for Maggie, because her friend is in danger, and it's going to be up to her and the team to find out who the person is and why they're doing it. So yeah, and I loved writing it because it involves some really creepy stuff, and it was fun to research.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I love the creepy serial killer, all that stuff.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And so, what's your writing process like? Do you outline, or do you pants through these books, or?
Oh, I'm terrible. I'm probably an editor's worst nightmare. I write every day for an hour. I spend an hour right after work, and I do 1,000 words a day, or I aim for that. And if I don't hit my 1,000, although knock on wood, that hasn't happened yet, but I'm usually spending that hour also doing part research as well. So, and I make sure I do that every day, because I think it's really important to kind of have that routine for me. Because I used to be when I first started, I was like, oh, I just don't have time to do it. And, of course, my blogging and stuff has suffered because I don't have as much time to read, but I need to dedicate that time. And I don't outline anything, although for this book, I kind of outlined the first 5 or so chapters to kind of give me an idea. And I write, I'm a chaotic mess when it comes to my writing. I write the first 20,000 words relatively in order of how they should go. And then, and I also write the first chapter and the last chapter. Those are the first 2 things I write. And then after 20,000 words, I just write whatever pops into my head, and it's totally out of order. And then I have to spend, once it's finished, a lot of time putting the chapters in the correct order. So, and then hopefully, sometimes when I get my edits back, my editor's kind of like, well, you said this here. And I obviously hadn't picked it up, because I think also when you're editing, you're so close to your work that you're blind to a lot of things. So, in my head, it looks perfect because I'm reading it how I think it should be read, even though that's not how it is on the paper. So yeah, she'll come back and go, you need to either move this chapter or insert something else here. But as each book has progressed, that's gotten better. So I must be learning something along the way. But yeah, I'm a total mess when it comes to writing, because I just can't write in order after 20,000. I hit a brick wall. I have to write whatever's in my head. And I used to laugh at authors when I heard them say, oh, the voice is in my head, because I was like, are you schizophrenic? What's going on here? But really it is. There's certain characters who kind of say, write me now. And I've got to get whatever they have to say out and down on paper before I forget it.
And what do you use to write? Do you use the Word, or do you use something else that lets you move things around?
What I have Scrivener, but I can't write on Scrivener. I write on Word. Then I upload it all to Scrivener. And then I change it around. I print it out then, and because I never get it right even when I move it around on Scrivener. Um, I print it out then, and I manually make sure and go through and move chapters around. And then I fix it on Scrivener and transfer it back to a Word doc. So it's a little bit of a pain in the backside, but it works for me. I tried doing other things. I tried outlining. I tried, like doing all the things these really organized and amazing authors do with their color charts of their characters. And I wish I could do that because I so love that kind of stuff. But I can't do it. My head just doesn't function that way.
Yeah, I see some of that to the color. Yeah, yeah, that's way too organized for me as well. But yeah, I get jealous when I see that.
Yeah, I know, it's awesome. It's so awesome. Actually, it'd be great if someone just did that for me, and then I could pick it up, after the fact and keep it going. But I just don't have the patience. And now that I'm at 5 books in, it just seems like such a daunting task.
Yeah, well, it's working for you. Yeah, you got 5 books in, so
Yeah, so it clearly works. So
yeah,
I'm not going to change it.
yeah, yeah. I can't remember who I read that did that. They printed the manuscript and then they would lay it out on the floor, and then she
Yeah,
would sit there and like a jigsaw
yeah.
would move things around. So hey, yeah, whatever works.
It works for me, and I have tried every other way possible trying to be more organized, but I always revert back to the chaos. So
And I love reading those books of being in the United States, living here about from other countries. I love reading those international thrillers. What's the crime fiction in British? It seems so lively, and they have such great books. So? It seems like it's a pretty vibrant scene over there.
oh my God, it's fantastic. When I lived in Toronto, I moved here when I was, I think, 27 or 28. And I was really big into like Kathy Reichs and, those type of series, Patricia Cornwall. And I still love them, Linwood Barclay. Those were like my favorite authors over there. And I moved here and I started reading the series. And it took me a while because sometimes they use the accents in, like especially Scottish authors, who I love. There's some incredible Scottish authors over here. But when they're using the actual dialogue, how they speak, it took me a while to kind of decipher what they were saying. But I, it's just what I love about British crime. It's quite gritty. There's that kind of gritty feel to it, almost an old noir feel to it. And I guess, you have like really big names here, like, although Steve Kavanagh he's Irish, and I don't know how big he is over in the States, but I think his books are based in the States, whereas a lot of the crime authors over here, especially like the ones I work with, Angie Marsden's is fantastic. Her series, Kim Stone, is actually set in a town that's an hour away from me. So, like when I go over, you kind of visualize these places that people are talking about. And my books are set in Staffordshire, where I work. And although I've kind of created fictional parts of Staffordshire, fictional towns, people have said to me, "Oh, I know exactly where you're talking about." And I love that about the British crime authors. And I'm sure it happens over there as well. But I haven't read a lot of US or even Canadian writers for quite some time because I live here. And I guess because I'm, submitting to British publishers, I kind of, although they want books that are easy to translate over in the US, I kind of have lost touch with what happens over there. But yeah, I just love the grittiness about them, and I'm a big swearer, I have to admit, and it's hard that I haven't sworn once yet. But I love that about the British too, because they're just like me, and I've always been that way. So the books. I know some people get offended by the language, but when you work, and I can attest to my own language when I worked in probation, we swore a lot. And there was a lot, it was kind of like that release. So I think it just adds that bit of authenticity to it, and the settings and the atmosphere, like, is just great over here because you've got, the rural countrysides literally, 20 minutes away from the towns and the big cities. So there's plenty of places to hide bodies, and it's still
Yeah.
quite atmospheric when you go on a drive. So the only thing about being a crime writer, though, now is that everywhere I go, I'm thinking, oh, that would be a great place to hide a body.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. We're wired weird like that. I'm the same way too. And I love going to, I love England and the UK. And I remember I had a friend who was living, I think it's called Bishop Stafford. It's out of London somewhere. It's like 30 miles. I can't remember. But yeah, it was like this countryside. I'm like, oh, this would be a perfect place to bury a body.
exactly that, exactly that. Like, I'm a big fan of Ian Rankin, who is one of the Scottish authors over here, and his Rebus series is based in Edinburgh. And every time I go up there to Edinburgh, and I love Scotland, I hope at some point to migrate or move over there at some point. But every time I go there, I'm thinking, oh my God, Rebus walked this street. Like, Rebus is a character. And I'm just saying, oh, and Rebus went into that pub, and oh, I know that. That's from, Flesh Market Close. And it's really bizarre how immersed as a reader you get into when you see these places where books that you love are based. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and do you see a lot? Are you getting more because the world's getting so small now? American readers enjoying the British thrillers because I think now we've got BBC America over here, where we're starting, like Luther and all those shows.
Oh, love Luther. Yeah, actually, I think a lot of our like, we have Lisa Regan, who is
Hmm.
she is US based, although we publish her here in the UK. She has a really great series out, and her latest, Save Her Soul, was out yesterday. Um, so she has a big US fan base. And DK Hood, who is originally from the UK but lives in Australia, she sets her books in America. And she has a big fan base over there. And we've got John Ryder, who is a pseudonym for Graham Smith. He's a Scottish-based author, but he's got some amazing action thrillers. First Shot is his debut action thriller, which is US-based, but his characters all have a UK or Scottish background. So I think they are transferable in that sense. And I think the American and Canadian audiences like to read the British crime series, but also like it when it has a bit of the Americanism in it, if you know what I mean. Like,
Hmm.
I think they struggle sometimes with some of the terms, and sometimes I think they struggle with the difference in how police work over here versus over there.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's growing, and it's really great to see because, especially when, if I was in Canada now, I'd be reading more of the British um, writers
Hmm.
because their writing it's so different.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like you say, it's transferable. People love that stuff. They love watching, like you mentioned, Luther.
Hmm.
Huge fan of Luther, and I love the fact that he is such an he's the heart of the detective. He's got a good heart, but he's such a bad. I was going to say a swear there. Such a bad boy. He has that edginess to him. Maybe that's what it is. That edginess to him.
Yeah, yeah. If the listeners haven't watched Luther, I highly recommend to go check that out.
Definitely.
Is it Idris Elba? I believe is how you pronounce the name. He's such a
Yes,
fantastic actor.
he is.
Okay, well, I always like to ask before wrapping things up about advice for aspiring writers, and especially since you're working with the publishing company. Any advice for aspiring crime thriller writer?
Yes, absolutely. Things that have really helped me, for instance, are read in the genre that you want to write. So, but read as a writer, be critical rather than as a reader, you'll find things, you know, how pace is built up in a book, and where suspense, adds to a storyline. And I think you find that more when you're reading for a particular reason. So, if police procedurals are your thing, read as many of those as you possibly can, and kind of give it a critique, look at it from that sense. Another bit of advice I would say is make the time to write, no excuses. I only write an hour a day. And, if you write an hour a day, you can get a book finished within your first draft finished within, 2 to 6 months, depending on how long or how fast you type. And that's really good. So, do that. And in terms of advice, it's great taking advice from people. People will give you a lot of advice about various processes and submitting and all that kind of stuff. You really have to take on that advice, but find what works for you, because what works for one person might not work for another person. Like, people told me, oh, you should plot out your books and you should do this and you should do that. That doesn't work for me. So definitely take the advice, including the stuff I'm telling you today, and find what works for you. And when it comes to submitting, do your homework. Don't just submit to any random publisher. The publisher is going to want to know that and have looked into them. You're not going to submit a sci-fi book, for instance, to a publisher that only publishes crime fiction, because you'll immediately be ignored. So find that publisher that you think will work for your book. But don't be dismayed if you get rejected, because a lot of the time with publishers, it's not because your writing is bad. It's because they already have a series or a book that's quite similar. Or it could be that they personally don't know how to market it themselves. So don't be dismayed by rejection either. Angie Marsons, for instance, who is one of our biggest and bestsellers at Bookouture, and she's fantastic. She's now into book 14, I think, of her series, or 13. She was rejected for 25 years before Bookouture took her on. And now she's, a multi-million best-selling author. So,
Yeah, I got to stick with it.
Her books were bad. It just wasn't. It just wasn't for the publishers that she was submitting to.
Yeah, I think I've interviewed over 100 authors now. A lot of especially those that are submitting. It seems like anywhere from 20 to 40 rejections is like the minimum that for most of them.
Yeah, and I know my experience is totally different from other people. I did have rejections in between having offers, but I think that was just, I don't know, good timing, I guess. And I was expecting, a year or two of getting rejections and just keep writing and writing and writing. And I know plenty of people who have been rejected for, a couple of years, or but now are like international best-selling authors. So, just don't give up. If you love writing, keep doing it.
That's good advice. And so, where can the listeners find you? Your websites, and where you hang out?
I'm all over the place. I'm on Twitter at nholten40, or if you just type in Crime Book Junkie, I should come up. My blog is crimebookjunkie.co.uk. And you can Google Crime Book Junkie. And actually, if you Google Crime Book Junkie, I think my author page comes up, Noelle Holten, author, on Facebook. I'm on Crime Book Junkie on Facebook. So, yeah, I'm on Instagram at Crime Book Junkie. So, yeah, if you just search for Crime Book Junkie and look for me and my blonde distance stare picture, my slide profile. And that picture was me. My profile picture for my author page and my Instagram was when I got to sit beside Ian Rankin and sign my books, because I got a spot on Crime in the Spotlight for Bloody Scotland to read the prologue for Dead Inside before Ian Rankin to a sold-out audience. Oh, so wow. I was looking at him with oh my God, I can't believe I'm here.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. So yeah, I see you kind of like awestruck there.
Yes, that's exactly it. And I'm like, I will never take that picture down. In fact, I might get a t-shirt made of it because that was like one of the best moments of my life.
All right, that's more in conjecture now. Cool.
Yeah.
All right, Noelle. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really enjoyed talking with you, and good luck on your book launch coming up and everything else.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Meet the Thriller Author podcast. Be sure to visit thrillerauthors.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover great thrilling reads. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review to it wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast, be it iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, wherever it is that you're listening to this right now. I would appreciate it. And please do check out my own thriller novels over at my website at alanpeterson.com. Until next time.